Thanks. So, if you remember how going on the broad invasion of Russia to Ukraine, you maybe remember, but I also mentioned one more again that on March 22, the Times published a short news story about Russia war against Ukraine under the thanks. And there's a headline, Russia plans kidnapped and violence in Great Terror to end Kherson protests. The message referred to the leak of information from a person whose affiliation with Russia Special Service was previously confirmed. The news describe what actions Russia is ready to take in order to suppress the protest of Kherson citizens against Russia occupation. In order to suppress the mass protest, the Russia planned to use the tactic of mass terror, which would consist in the forced displacement of forced eviction of the resident of Kherson to Russia. At the same time, it was noted that the number of people who may be forcibly deported can be huge. You also can read citation that those informator from the Russian security services mentioned that, start citation, even if we have to deport as many as half city, we are ready for that. And later in this news, this informator also mentioned that the order to to use every measure against the protests coming from very above. So from the April to the June mainly, a lot of different news coming about how many people was deported. The first news in Ukrainian media rose on March 24. It's according deportation more than 50,000 residents of city Mariupol from Mariupol to Russia. And from April to June, a lot of new news coming in the Ukrainian media as well as the foreign media. Also a lot of different mentions, not only like from some present-day temporarily occupied territory of Ukraine, but also a lot of information from different official statements like Ukrainian government, Ukrainian president, different Ukrainian officials in UN, in other international organizations, as well as, for example, Secretary of State Antony Blinken also mentioned about deportation from the present-day Russian deportation from the temporary part of Ukraine, and also Parliament of European Union also adopt some special resolutions about deportation from Ukraine. To the June of this year, the number of people who was forcibly displaced from the temporarily occupied territory to Russia, it's mainly stays the same to present day. According to the Russian news information, in approximately 1,936,000 people who were including more than 300,000 children. At the beginning of October, it's like October the 6th, Ukrainian presidents in their speech to the organization in some of their speech mentioned that around of 1.6 million people was deported from temporary occupation part of Ukraine. Simultaneously with the publication of this news about the forced relocation of Ukrainians to Russia, several analytical materials are comparative historical articles were published in the media, and you can see on slide some of them. First of those materials was the post on the website of the Ukrainian Institute of National Remembrance. It's called "Why is the Deportation of Mariupol Residents Repetition of History?" It was began of April. Then also before the huge anniversary of, for example, of Crimean Tatars deportations, arose new blogs on Дзеркало Тижня websites, deportation.ru, they can repeat also then Ukrainer, it's like a media project published a huge long read with on the title Russia deports Ukraine once again. Also in the September, Ukrainian Crisis Media Center also published posts about deportations on the title Deportation of Ukraine, How Modern Russia Repeats the Citizen of the Soviet Union. But also, it's not only the titles from Ukrainian media mention the present-day deportations in the context of Soviet deportation or Russian Empire deportation, but also the, some foreign materials arose. For example, the last one in the post in Washington Post, and on the title "Long Before Ukrainian Deportations, Soviet Abduct Baltic Citizens." And also they mention that in those materials that what we can saw today in Ukraine, it happens in Baltic states, and Russia repeat again and again the same measures, the same methods. So from one point of view, it looks like we can talking about the same phenomenon like Russia deportations, again Ukrainians, again Baltic states, again different and different occupied territories. But if we really talking about the same phenomenon, about the same measures, if we can talking about like a great roots of great Russia tradition of deportees, the peoples from occupied territory, and I try to describe some research questions. So, can we talk about the repetition or even the historical continuity of Russian deportation from the territory of Ukraine, for example? The next one: how comparable are the deportations measures of the Russian Empire and Soviet Union and contemporary Russia? And of course, how can we conceptualize contemporary Russia forced eviction from the temporary occupied territories of Ukraine? At the end of spring, it's all these questions looks like very easy to answer. But if I try to find all this answer to this issue, it looks not so easy. First of all, of course, it's like a issue of framework. Can we, of course, all different Russia regimes was very different, and if we try to analyze that from some political science approaches, it's not easy to say that we're talking about the same regimes. But if from another side, if we try to use some framework what adopt on the according empire and imperialism or colonial dependence, it may be much more easy to try to explain that we can compare or talking that the same nature of rules of Romanovs in Russian Empire during Soviet times and in present-day Russia, that we can talking about some kind of imperialism or colonial dependence. And as for me, the last one mentioned what was used by Eva Thompson about colonial dependence. She mentioned that not only economical exploration of the periphery, what it's used by the center, but also it's depends to the another spheres like culture, some in agriculture, for example, some habits, but also to the demographic patterns. And from this point of view, I think that we can then we can try to analyze different measure of different Russia states. And of course, Eva Thompson analyze and argues that Soviet Union, despite some ideological issue, maybe things like some kind of Russia state. So in my point of view, it's maybe enough to the like some preliminary analysis, but of course it's like not so easy issue to try to find answer. So if we moving to and of course If come back, sorry?
No, I think you have just 1 minute, Andriy. I'm sorry, but
great.
we will have,
Okay.
we're here to help you to develop them through questions.
Then very quickly about in some like bullet points thesis, what we can saw if we analyze the forcibly eviction or forcibly displacements in both in all three reincarnation of Russia Empire. If you're talking about Russia Empire, we can like analyze. We can mention like 3 different type of forced eviction. It's first of all, it's very well-known exile to Siberia. Next one, it's mass resettlement of different ethnic groups. And the last one, but not least, it's the First World War mass displacement. If we mention exile to Siberia, then used mainly like punishment tools for criminal offers, against some peoples who have different political beliefs, not accordingly to the Tsarist regime. And of course, the last one, it's a people who was repressed to the exile because they was a member of different upspring and revolutionary actions. And of course, the mainly very well known in academia is the history of different Polish exile. And if we, for example, try to compare the deportation in Soviet Union and in Tsarist regime, for mainly for Polish historians, but also for those historians who describe history of Poland in 19th, 20th centuries, it was very clear that the Polish people who struggle for the independence have the same fate like in Russia Empire, in Soviet Union.
If we kind of have to stop.
Okay, maybe I show the slides and
just show quickly.
very quickly. Mass resettlement of ethnic groups. It's mainly those groups who we are so-called motherlands lie in the newly occupied territory on the border of empire, like for example Crimean Tatars from the present-day South Ukraine, or Cherkess or Adygi people from North Caucasus, where placed today's city Sochi, so on. But if we mention, for example, First World War, it's extremely important for understanding present-day Russia measures, because we can see a lot of the present-day measures like that forcibly evacuations, when they mention especially so-called enemy subjects like Germans or German colonists, and also some unreliable elements, people who may be dangerous for the regime.
Yeah.
Soviet Union. So very briefly, as I saw to the comparing the different Russian measures in Russian Empire, Soviet Union, and in contemporary Russia, I think that we can saw some common feature with the previous Russia regime, according during the mainly two World War, like First and Two. At the same time, the greater extent repeats the patterns of forced displacement during the First World War, despite the fact that peoples mainly mention experience from the Second World War. And the logic of the deployment and of the eviction process present-day Russia is very chaotic nature, and of course they have a strong connection with internal propaganda, and this deportation, like as for me, unexpected consequence of quick war filing.
Example.
That's all. Okay, thanks. Okay. Sorry.
All right.